generation in the United States, and on election day, the choice couldn't be more stark between Kamala Harris, the incumbent vice president of the Democratic Party, and Donald Trump, the former president of the Republican Party. Now, it boils down to about half a dozen.
This year election, I am one of the best tension urban mupa.
Anu timi busaw emfi etwe mu no wo ye wadwen se wonto aba afi wo beto aba anase wonto aba
ni nyina ye Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, the vice president and the running mate for New Patriotic Party. Sasna former president John Dramani Mahama was say ohwe ebomode se obetimi asabedi Ghana.
Wonsom woni nipa wo ye oman bapa anu nti ene yesere se kan ye ho esanse yewura abato afim.
Nyina nim se Fourth Republic 1992 ana JJ timi at the bar Fourth Republic. Fi one NPP NDC a dominate up to this time. Now onim say NPP edi nkunim atoa so emfie du esia 16 years. Sana NDC so aba 16 years. Eno na ma this year election no aye.
Ye ba beto aba eba ne sana ensam dodo na na ekoso efiti mfie bie etwam edekọ edibesi nne NPP amanyokuo enya sen afi NPP amanyokuo ebenya sen.
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia say 8 years ena JJ ekoye from the year 2000 no mampanyi dada akofo eba ye ono so di 8 years. Prof Mills eba ye fofia antoata ena chese NDC sato aso 8 years.
NDC eda sen NDC ebenya sen ahodo aka wo mu inada eka ho
under John Dramani Mahama enei Nana-Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo Ghana mampanyi so abedi 80 NPP chese 8 years now. There is a time where we break 8 because a Juma NPP ayen it's fata say ye toa NPP. John Dramani Mahama say NPP for buy no can no montimi amfa nko ba bia e was still ano de Bawumia ntimi emfa nko. Nuti and at the NDC led by former president John Dramani Mahama and in the running mate Jenana omo HSA omo betimi aba abeji Ghana efin kwasum ene NPP for HSA digital ewiase nyina be ekuro baako enti digital no betimi dia transform Ghana ama enema nyina akoye nanso NDC kyerese omo so the 24-hour economy eba
na mo nsem ho se election head office ye de eba besomo afempinu eni eduonu nan
sanse bre no be fra to man Ghana mu se wa ma no ne ba bia wo bia modi se ubehwe ye brano
anu nti ewo dwumadie mu no ye beto nsa edi afre etitiriw enintinu ahemfo enne womo makwadre ewo amanyosem kire amanyosem a eya amanyosem womo a womo nimdi ewo na womo nso aba ba kire omadwene
ne etimide the current update from the various political party enyema ekoso ya de ekoso behind the scene ne nyina no ye de ba eti kame esuo ne kwabre de hye kwaku jamfi betimi afem Robert ni menua
aduma nkomoba nana Kofi from Ashanti gudi
ena afei champion editors producers Obistone ena afei edi eboye chidom
abusua tikro enko ejina enu nti ene yesero se eduru ho a jebre na hweyen ebra ye de dwumadi atu no din se election head office e de eba besomo
wo dwumadi isu no ye be kɔ various market ahodo ne ne adwadifo kɔdi nkomo afa this coming election
anu nti dwumadi mu no se wo pese wo so yasene a wadawroma obetimi afre ahomatru
0549324385 0549324385 enti election head office pania kura to for mo a ye de bebre.
Difference of a night and a day that people need to look at in an entirety.
Congressman, I do want to ask you about the Indian American community. There's a lot of them in your state, Michigan, as well. Do you see them as some kind of a swing constituency? They used to be always favoring the Democrats, but of late, some within the Indian American community also seem to be backing Trump. Is the Indian American community in your state also split like most other communities as far as this election's choice is concerned?
Yeah, just like, the Arab American community is not a monolithic community. Just like that, the Indian American community is not a monolithic community. We have conservatives, we have liberals, we have moderates in the Indian American community. Their economy is a huge issue. Immigration is a huge issue. And this is the first time an Indian immigrant, Shyamala Gopalan's daughter, going to be the next president of the United States. This is a matter of immense pride to the Indian American community. So we cannot forget the fact that she is the daughter of an Indian immigrant. And this is history making. When Kamala Harris becomes the president of the United States, an Indian immigrant's daughter will be sitting there at the most important job in the whole world.
I do want to ask you about that a bit, though, because there's a feeling within some in the Indian American community that she's sort of playing up her African American heritage more than her South Asian or Indian heritage. Obviously, I mean, African Americans are a much bigger voter base here in America, so politically speaking, that makes sense. But why aren't we feeling that in the Indian American community, that the community is on the verge of making history? You could potentially have the first ever Indian American president.
Well, this is very, very important, I know. And she is, not only the first female president of the United States, she'll be the first person of color, a person of a mixed background, Indian American as well as African American. So this is a matter of immense pride. She's broken that ceiling and reaching that top. And we as Indian Americans, I came to America as an immigrant when I was 24 years old. And I understand the struggles that Kamala's mother must have gone through back in those days. And for her daughter to become the president of the United States, what a proud moment, what an amazing, and Indian Americans cannot forget that.
Congressman, I do want to talk to you about one issue which has been, as well as in Canada, about these attacks that are happening at Hindu places of worship, temples. The Khalistanis are at the forefront of it. How would you speak to those concerns? How would you address those concerns?
Well, look, we are seeing attacks on minority Hindus in different parts of the world. Bangladesh, Hindus are tortured. Their places of worship have been attacked. In the United States, we have seen about 25 different temples have been attacked with graffiti and anti and hate messages. I have spoken with the State Department. I have written to the State Department, and I've asked the State Department that FBI investigate these crimes as hate crimes, and these need to be investigated. Those who are guilty must be punished to the fullest extent of the law. And as a United States Congressman of Indian origin and chairman of the Hindu caucus in the United States Congress, I'm urging Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, to ensure that the rights of the minority Hindus in Canada are protected, and that they need to get special protection and ensure that such attacks on their places of worship must be stopped and must be investigated. People in Canada, Hindus all across the world, must be able to practice their religion without fear, without intimidation. And that's what I would ask the Canadian government to ensure and to make sure their human rights are protected.
Well, earlier we showed you that surprising new poll out of Iowa. It shows Vice President Harris up 3 points over the former president, 47% to 44%, which is a big turnaround from the same poll in September. Now, that number is still within the margin of error, so there's no clear leader. But a swing like this, and from such a well-respected pollster with a long track record in Iowa, has some wondering if this could be an indication that Harris may overperform in the Midwest Tuesday night, including even in battlegrounds like Wisconsin. Today, while speaking in Pennsylvania, the former president attacked the pollster and said the poll was intentionally skewed to favor Harris.
I got a poll, I'm 10 points up in Iowa. One of my enemies just puts out a poll, I'm 3 down. Why do they announce a poll that's highly skewed toward Democrats and liberals? Why do they do that? When you read it, they interviewed far more Democrats than they did Republicans. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? And I guess there's a law that they have to say that, because they would have preferred not having to say that.
Well, I'm joined now by J.N. Selzer, whose firm, Selzer and Company, conducted the poll. And back with us is David Axelrod and John King. And first of all, how surprised were you at these numbers? What do you make of them? And also, obviously, feel free to respond to what the former president said.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. we first saw the numbers on Tuesday morning. Monday night was the first night in the field. And I walked into the office and I'd seen overnight, I'd seen the unweighted data and it had Harris leading. And my assistant said, "Did you see the data?" And I said, "I'd like to see weighted data." So the weighting is how we take care of things that make it would make our poll unrepresentative. We align things with a known population and we extract from a larger group the people who meet our definition of likely voters, and that is people who've already voted and people who say they will definitely vote. So when former President Trump says we interviewed more Democrats, well, that's what came out of our data. We did nothing to make that happen. I'm a big believer of keeping my dirty fingers off the data. So we did it the way we did it when he won in our final poll twice in 2 election cycles. Very same method.
He said you're an enemy of his. Clearly that's not the case. You have had polls in the past which have shown, that Hillary Clinton wasn't going to do as well in Iowa as a lot of people thought. So you have been, delivered news which has upset Democrats and upset Republicans and people all over the map in the past.
Right, without favor toward one side or the other. I think that the best news I can deliver, and this is true of my non-election related clients, the best news I can deliver is my best shot at what's true. Because then you know what you're working with and you can make adjustments as you need to. But I can't see that there's any advantage to me or my career in messing with the numbers to make it look a particular way. There's no upsides.
Yeah. I want to bring in John and David Axelrod because they all know you and respect you, and I know they want to ask you questions. John, I know you've been reading through the poll. What sticks out to you? And feel free to ask Ann whatever you'd like.
Yeah, quick piece of history first. This is the 2020 map. Let's just bring out Iowa. And you say, a lot of people out there probably saying, oh, come on, that can't be possible. Look at that big Trump win in 2020 and look at this big Trump win in 2016. But you have Mr. Axelrod at the table as well. It is possible. It is possible. It's been a while, but Iowa voted overwhelmingly for Obama in 2012 and 2008 as well. The people of Iowa follow the news, and there are a lot of independents in Iowa. Here's what I want to pop up for Ann. And as I bring it up right now, I just want to say, despite what the former president just said, I've known Ann for a long time, and I've known her work for a long time. She's one of the best in the business, Anderson, and she's absolutely right. The data is what the data is, and you report the data, and then you talk about it. So here's interesting, Ann, in your poll, among female voters in Iowa, overall, a 20-point gap, 56 to 36%, number one. And now I want to bring up, independents. You're always looking late in a campaign. Where are the independents going, right? If the Democrats are loyal to their candidate, the Republicans are loyal to theirs, where are the independents going? These are independent female voters in Iowa. Look at that, wow, 57 to 29. My question for you, Ann, would be, why? The 6-week abortion ban in Iowa took place a couple months ago. Trump has been pretty dark in his rhetoric in recent days, insulting the vice president quite a bit. Is it something she's saying, something he's saying, something within Iowa that's changing the climate, all of the above?
I'm going to go with all of the above because I can't single one thing out. I will note that our previous polls this year, in February and in June, Trump led with independents.
Right.
So what happened between June and September? Biden left the ticket. Kamala Harris joined it. There was a surge of enthusiasm. We saw it. There was a surge in the proportion of people we talked to who said they would definitely vote. That was our criterion in June. And now we have an additional criterion if you've already voted. And especially among older people, it's over 90% incidence of people that we talk to in that age group who say they're going to vote, and they tend to vote for Kamala Harris, and women in that age group specifically and strikingly.
And let me ask you something, and I don't want to geek out here because you sort of touched on it, but we hear a lot of pollsters, and Nate Cohn wrote about this in the New York Times this morning, talking about non-response bias, that to try and explain why polls have been so off in the past few cycles in capturing some of this infusion of Trump voter that they hadn't spoken with and hadn't been included in their sample. And so they've tried to find ways to weight their polls to account for that and cut that number down. You don't believe that is that's the way to go. Explain it.
Well, I can control what I can control. I can weight to known population parameters.
By the way, when you say
So we
wait,
talk.
I think a lot of people don't know
yeah.
what that means. What does that mean?
It will sound very anti-democratic. It's some people get a little bit more than one vote, and some people get a little bit less than one vote. So if we end up in our sample and we take a sample of all adults in the state of Iowa, and if we've got too many who are older or too many that are women, we adjust it to look like the census. So we're weighting within congressional districts because they're not all aged appropriately. Some of them have state universities and so on. But we want to adjust our data so it looks like a cross-section of the state of Iowa when it comes to age, sex, geography in particular, race, sometimes education, not so much anymore. And then from that bigger pool, over 1,000 people, we pull out the 808 who met one of our criteria as to be a likely voter. They've already voted, or they say that they will definitely vote. And so from that, cross-section, proper cross-section of the state, if older people are more likely to say they're going to vote, they show up in more plentiful numbers in our likely voter sample.
I see.
It's just that easy. So what I say is I'm allowing my data to reveal to me this future electorate. And the people who are using back, the exit polls or the recalled vote, which I don't think of as very reliable at all, I call that polling backward. So they're adjusting their data to fix the last mistake. I've always allowed my data to show me, without fear or favor, what my best shot at what this future electorate is going to look like.
Can I just second John's point? Which is, I've worked with you, Ann, over the years. You've polled races I was involved in, and you are a person of great integrity and skill. So when you say something, people listen.
All right. Ann Selzer, really great to have you on. Thank you so much.
The rate about he called the election too big to rig. Let's watch.
I do believe it is too big to rig. I think it's too big to rig. They'll try. And they are trying, though. It's too big to rig. This is a big movement. This is, we did great in 2016. We did much better in 2020, but a lot of bad things happened. This is that big, powerful, vicious party. No, it's a vicious machine. I mean, they can take all these bad ideas and win elections. It's like there's only way you could do that. One way. There's only one way.
Sir, if Donald Trump loses the election today, should he concede?
Look, I think that one commitment I think Republicans can make is if Donald Trump loses this election and Kamala Harris becomes the president, God forbid in my case, I'm not rooting for that outcome, Republicans are not going to launch some type of multi-year investigation that impedes the first 2 years of her presidency with false allegations of foreign election interference. We've seen that within the last decade in this country.
Right, but it's a yes or no question, sir. I mean, should he concede or should he not?
I think whoever wins the election should win the election and whoever loses should concede. But the fact of the matter is, when we look at the last 10 years, in case you and I both understand the subtext of this question, there's been this, I think, brewed up concern that I think is really designed, I think in many ways, to mislead voters about what's happened in the last 10 years.
Misleading voters. I mean, people attack the Capitol to try to interrupt the process of certifying the last election.
If I may just finish my point, that's no doubt been talked, the January 6th issue has been talked about ad nauseum. What hasn't is the fact that the presidency was actually undermined by Kamala Harris and the Democrats, the Democratic Party that Kamala Harris is a part of, for the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency on allegations of a false Russia collusion hoax that was disproven. So what do we want this time around? We want a free, fair election where the winner is decisively decided. Americans can then move forward as a country behind that. Whichever candidate wins, I'm looking forward to that happening for the country. And I'm hoping that's Donald Trump tonight.
Are you confident our election today is going to be free and fair?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think I would ask the same question of you. I have every hope that the polling locations are properly monitored, that you see a lot of the cases that have worked themselves out this time around with respect to early voting, the timestamps that need to be on them. I think Pennsylvania and their courts came down, I think, on the right side of that decision. One of the things that we have a great consciousness of as well is people being able to vote effectively on time. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see an outstanding, well-run election with a great result. And as you know, I'm supporting Donald Trump and I'm rooting for that victory tomorrow.
All right, Vivek Ramaswamy for us this morning. Sir, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's turn now to this. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have spent the past several weeks looking to win over voters of the opposite gender, respectively. At the same time, in the final days of this campaign, Trump and his allies have gone after Harris and other Democratic women in remarkably
On the final day of their respective presidential campaigns, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris both predicted victory on Monday, with opinion polls showing them locked in a dead heat. The candidates concentrated their efforts in Pennsylvania, the biggest prize on Election Day among the 7 states expected to decide the outcome. Trump appeared before a large crowd in Pittsburgh, where he delivered what his campaign called his closing message to voters.
I will restore peace in the world, and I will rescue the American dream.
Trump pushed economic themes, vowing to deliver an economic boom, while warning Harris would bring economic misery.
My message to Americans tonight is simple. We do not have to live this way. We don't.
Trump's frantic Monday schedule also included stops in the battleground states of North Carolina and Michigan, before returning to his Florida home Monday night. Meanwhile, Harris packed in 5 campaign stops in Pennsylvania throughout the day. In Allentown, she appealed to the city's sizable Puerto Rican community after a comedian at a Trump rally last week made racist comments about Puerto Ricans and other minority groups.
We are not going back. We are not going back.
Later, Harris went door-knocking in Reading and held her own brief rally in Pittsburgh. Harris ended the day with an event in Philadelphia, where she was joined by A-list celebrities including Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey. Harris forecast a close race and for the last time implored Pennsylvanians to get out the vote.
The race ain't over yet, and we must finish strong, and this could be one of the closest races in history. Every single vote matters.
The Harris campaign says its internal data shows that undecided voters are breaking in their favor. It reports an increase in early voting among core parts of its coalition, including young voters and voters of color. Trump campaign officials meanwhile said they were monitoring early voting results that show more women have voted than men. That is significant considering Harris's 12-point edge over Trump among female registered voters, according to an October Reuters Ipsos poll. The winner may not be known for days after Tuesday's vote. Trump and his allies, who falsely claim his 2020 election loss was the result of fraud, have already signaled they will attempt to fight any defeat. They have spent months laying the groundwork to again challenge the result if he loses. Harris campaign officials said any attempts by Trump to allege fraud will fail, while Democrats say they have plans in place should Trump try to prematurely claim victory.
As all eyes are on the much-awaited election result, let's also talk about the several key issues at stake in the U.S. elections. Economy is number one. Remember, economy has been spoken of widely, and yes, the Republicans and the Democrats have a very different opinion on how they want to take that forward in terms of
the race for the White House in its final leg now, and very shortly the fate of either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, all of that is going to be decided. Which way is America going to vote? We will get to know in just a short while from now. So with the presidential campaign really winding down, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have delivered their final campaign messages to Pennsylvania voters, a state which is seen as a pivotal to securing victory. In just a few hours, the world will know whether Trump returns to office after 4 years or if America will elect Kamala Harris, its first woman president, and that too of Indian origin.
Where the foundation of our democracy was forged. And here at these famous steps, a tribute to those who start as the underdog and climb to victory. So America, it comes down to this. One more day, just one more day in the most consequential election of our lifetime, and the momentum is on our side. Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people. We are optimistic and we are excited about what we can do together. And we know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
And as the race for the White House narrows down, CNN News 18's Saka Jacob reports from Washington, D.C. Take a look.
This is what it boils down to. Today, the 5th of November, America will decide between Kamala Harris, the incumbent vice president on the Democratic ticket, and Donald Trump, the former president, on the Republican ticket. And the choices could not be more stark. The messaging in the final 24 hours leading up to Election Day could not be more stark. Kamala Harris is talking about a message of optimism, a message of moving forward and turning the page on what has been a tumultuous Trump era. Trump, on the other hand, has said that everything that's wrong with America, and mind you, a large number of people in this country find that the country is on the wrong track, that is because of the Biden-Harris administration, whether it's on economy, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on the two wars that are going on right now. Trump is squarely laying the blame at the White House, where we're reporting from, saying that the Biden-Harris administration is squarely responsible for the mess that America and the rest of the world finds itself in. But today it's going to be the choice between, on the one hand, possibly making history. Kamala Harris could become the first ever woman president of the United States in the almost 250-year history of this country. America has never had a woman president. Hillary Clinton came closest back in 2016, 8 years ago, when she lost to the same Donald Trump, who's now standing in the way of Kamala Harris potentially becoming the first ever woman president of this country. On the other hand, Trump looks like 2024 for him is unfinished business. Remember, in the history of American presidencies, a successful president is almost always decided by whether he gets a second term. Trump believes he was robbed of a second term in 2020 in an election which him and his supporters have been denying that they ever lost in the first place, and more importantly, they say that that election was stolen away from them. So this is a chance at redemption for Trump, his MAGA base, and of course, a lot of non-Trump aficionados or non-Trump lovers who are also backing him this time around. In fact, we've been in Washington for the last couple of days, and people that we normally speak to 4 years ago or 8 years ago who were reluctant to say that they were supporting Trump, this time around are quite openly saying that they would prefer to back Trump. Now, what's working for him is the message that he's a strong man and that when he was in office, the economy was doing better. At least average Americans were feeling that their economic plight was better than what it is right now. So he's running on that record. He's also running on what he calls the misgovernance of the Biden-Harris administration. But let's be very clear. This race is going to go down to the wire. It's going to boil down to about half a dozen swing states, 3 in the north, about 4 in the south. That's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania in the north, which is a must-win for Kamala Harris. There is no path for her to 270 without winning these 3 states. On the other hand, Trump is looking strong in the southern Sun Belt states, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina. He won only 1 out of those 4 last time around in 2020. This time, he's leading in almost all of them. One significant thing that we should pay attention to is the turnout. Already 75 million Americans have voted early, either through mail-in ballots or through early in-person voting. That's almost half of the total turnout of 2020. The question is, how many more will turn out today on Election Day? It's about which of the 2 bases are more enthused and find it more attractive to come out and feel more aggrieved or feel more passionately about putting their candidate in the White House. The question really is, who has the edge going into these battleground states? The Harris campaign feels there is one issue that is resonating statewide, and that is the issue of abortion. And they're looking at the early voting data, which seems to suggest that college-educated white women, particularly older white women, are voting for Harris in numbers they thought was not possible up until a few weeks ago. Trump, on the other hand, is backing on his non-educated, non-college educated white male vote, and also on the youth vote, whether it is black young men or even Hispanic young men who feel left out of this Democratic coalition. So it will ultimately boil down to a fight between the two social coalitions, a fight between the ardent supporters of both sides, and ultimately who is more enthused to turn up for their candidate. It is going to be a riveting election day, and may I say election night, here in America. And join me, Zakir Jacob, and my video journalist Chintan Puri, who will be here through the day today and through the next few days to get you the very latest in the race for the White House.
And CNN's chief national correspondent John King has broken down the 2024 race using the magic wall before Election Day. Take a look.
Here's the 2016 flashback. This is where we were on this day in 2016, where our projections had Hillary Clinton at 268, knocking on the door of 270 electoral votes in the White House. But look at this map. We had the blue wall leaning blue on that day, right? She lost all three of those to Donald Trump, which is why everybody at home, be prepared for anything to happen tomorrow, in the sense that you can be leading by a little bit. But we knew there was Trump movement at the end. The question was, she had led the race for so long. Was it enough to overcome? Well, it turned out on Election Day, it was enough to overcome. So where are we now? Right? We're in a much less clear situation, right? Let me just quickly do this. In 2020, we already had Joe Biden over the top. It was pretty clear from the data that Joe Biden was going to win the 2020 election the day before the election. We still had to wait for the count because of the pandemic complexities of the election, but it was pretty clear. And then again, you had to deal with the question, is Donald Trump surprising us again in 2020? And he did not. So here's where we are now. So the vice president, it's a modest lead, but she's had a consistent lead here. Modest lead, but a consistent lead here. Right, that would get her there. This is why Pennsylvania is so important. This is why both candidates are spending so much time and have spent so much.
And she's going to be there the entire day.
Right,
today.
right. And she's going to the right places in terms of getting votes and stuff. Because, look, if she holds these, doesn't mean she will. But she's had a modest, consistent lead in both of those states. If she holds these, that's enough, as long as she picks up Nebraska's 2nd congressional district where all the polling, so she's running strong. That's her easiest path. No path is easy. But that's the easiest path. If she doesn't win this, let's say Donald Trump wins that. How does Harris get there? Well, you have to win at least 2 more. And even these 2 wouldn't be enough. Let's say she did well out here. Those 2 aren't enough because they're not big enough in terms of how many electoral votes they have. That's why Pennsylvania is so prominent here. If you're Donald Trump, you think if you win Pennsylvania that you're going to do this again, right? That you're going to defy the polling again and you're going to do this.
Because almost always, except for I think it was 88 that they didn't vote together.
They voted together since 1992.
Yeah.
They have voted, the 3 of them have voted together since 1992, including 2016 when they did this. In every other election, they have voted blue, which is why, again, will we know the winner here tomorrow night? Maybe not, but we might know the winners here. And so you see if they're sticking together or anything like that. But if you watch this play out, even if Donald Trump wins the blue wall, he still has to win somewhere else. Right? But if you're winning the 3 of these, it's a pretty safe bet you're going to win at least 1 or 2 of those. We live in a pretty nationalized election climate. So that's why this one is so key, because it's 19. Right? This is 16. That's 16. You think, well, that's only 3. But when you're trying to get to 270, if we have a, he wins 1, she wins 1, then you just get into this wild card race. I mean, it lets us, if Donald Trump were to win the whole blue wall, right? This is what's fascinating to me. Let's just, these are the whiter, older states, right? Demographically, they should favor him. These have been more Republican states of late. But let's say Donald Trump won all that. Can the vice president still win? Well, yes, but she would have to pull off a Sun Belt sweep. You have to come across and just do the entire, come on for me there. She would have to do all the Sun Belt states, right? It would be a very different map, a map like we've never seen before. But 2020 was a map with Arizona and Georgia flipped we've never seen before, right. Which is why, these are the 3 that most likely are going to decide who goes to the dance, who gets 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Those are the 3 that likely to decide it. But again, we live in this crazy year where there's many different paths. There's many different ways to get there. And again, we could have a blow by blow, state by state, or somebody could sweep them like Biden did in 2020.
And Zakir Jacob also spoke with Dhruv Jaishankar, who's the ORF Executive Director, about the U.S. elections and what can we expect tonight. Let's take a look at that conversation.
So it's the big election in America between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. While there is so much interest in India and around the world as to who will become the next president of the United States, it ultimately boils down to a bunch of swing states, some important communities, whether they show up at the vote or not. We'll also talk about the Indian American community, whether they are overwhelmingly Democrat or they split. Let's try and find a little bit more about this U.S. election, which is being closely watched, with Dhruv Jaishankar, Executive Director with ORF America. Thank you very much, Dhruv, for speaking with us. So, big picture, I mean, we're a day away from election day. Just how big is this election? What are the stakes?
It's a big election. It feels like every 4 years there's a big election in the US. It's a very divided polity. Roughly 45% of Americans vote Republican, 45% vote Democrat. And really it's only about 5 to 10% whose opinion has to be swayed each election. And the divides are quite deep across age lines, gender lines, cultural lines, rural, urban. I think there's a big divide there. So I think this is playing out again as it is every 4 years.
What do you think it'll boil down to? I mean, in such a close race, is it the swing states? Is it who's motivated more? Is it anti-incumbency? What's the big X factor?
There are lots of X factors, which is what's making it hard to predict. The polls show pretty much a 50-50 split. 7 states will Pennsylvania. You think that will be a state that just mathematically, unless many other results go in a very unexpected manner, that's a state that both either candidate will have to win the election.
That's the biggest.
That's the biggest prize.
swing
Yeah, the
state.
biggest. Yeah. And the margins are going to be very thin. So ultimately, it'll come down to voter enthusiasm for the two candidates. Whether more of Trump supporters come out to vote on election day, or whether more of Harris's voters come out. And that will happen tomorrow, and that will really determine the outcome.
So, one interesting thing, and I guess in elections past, other than the 2021, one new phenomenon we've seen is a lot of people are voting early,
yes,
either by post or by mail-in, by in-person early voting. I think 75 million is the figure that I last checked. That's almost half the electorate.
Yes.
Is there anything in there for us to know that's perhaps the way in which this election is going?
So that has really changed in large part because of COVID. The last election happened during the pandemic, and that led to a lot more early voting. Traditionally, early voting has favored Democrats, and so those are counted later. That suggests that in many states we'll see a blue wave, a Democratic swing later. But it really will depend on a number of other factors. One of the things that's happened this time is this signs that more Republicans are voting early.
Okay.
So the balance may not be as skewed towards Democrats as in the past. But again, we'll only know after counting is completed.
Let's talk a little bit about the Indian American community. There's about 2.5 million of them. Generally they've been sort of Democrat leaning. This time, are you seeing anything different?
So traditionally about 2/3 are registered Democrats, about 25% are registered Republicans. There is some indication, there was a recent survey done by the Carnegie Endowment, there's another one of Asian American voters. It suggests that the picture might be a bit more complicated, particularly amongst younger men who might be gravitating more towards the Republican Party. But on balance, I would expect that the majority will still vote Democrat.
Tell us a little bit more about the younger men, because it's not just the Indian American young men. We're seeing that amongst African American young men. We're seeing among Hispanic young men, of course, white young men. Why are they gravitating towards Trump?
There are many sociological reasons. There's actually a very good book on this, on the sort of frustrations of younger men, particularly in developed economies, including the U.S., that they see fewer opportunities in the job market. They see few, they think that a sort of liberal agenda that prioritizes certain constituencies, including women, has been to their net disadvantage. And Trump and others seem to channel some of those frustrations. So they see an appeal there, and they see the doors closing on them more within the Democratic Party.
Well, that was an interesting conversation. Now, in the final stretch of the U.S. election, CNN News 18's Akanksha Swaroop has also got us a ground report. All of this from Chinatown in New York. Let's listen into what the voters in America really are saying.
Hi, I am in Chinatown, in fact at a store called Senbei, which deals in rice crackers, and I'm joined by two beautiful ladies. What's your name?
Sophia. Christina.
What do you do over here at the store?
So I'm a server at Senbei. I make the rice crackers and matcha. We're known for our giant rice crackers, and we also have some creme brulee cheesecake.
What do you do in Chinatown?
I'm a worker at La Momo, and we are a Hong Kong brand, and we promote our perfume lemons and our milk teas.
Oh, lovely. And how have you seen the United States change in the last 2-3 years, especially now with election campaigning happening? What are the issues?
Inflation has definitely went up. Our everyday groceries, we can't afford them, especially the working class, which is a serious problem when it comes to the health and nutrition of the youth.
What would you like to say?
I would like to say COVID really increased, promoted inflation, and that has really caused like the